Okay.
Sorry, I'm very confused by the live stream and I don't understand how it works. Yay! Yeah, this new YouTube app. Streaming it on my phone. What? My account. More than 1,000 followers. PS1. 1,190.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care. Is this what it looks like? Fuck you, YouTube. Like, someone asked me, like, why are you just using your personal account? This is a piece of shit. Like, oh, wait. Oh, that's okay. It's on Discord. But the order of people's rating. It's on Discord. It's Are you trying to say that to me or to yourself?
No. If you keep the resolution on default, it'll go to.
Oh, I see, because of using the, okay.
Yeah. That's why it's a little weird.
Yeah.
Because you added such a mirror, right? You need to actually move to that monitor and select it there.
the session code's there. Oh.
Yeah,
So there's one of the macro things. So it's all good.
for it.
Dude, hey, good to see you, man. Like 2 years.
Yeah, I think everything is working. I'm just.
like briefly plug in my laptop so I can see it. Like,
Oh, I think so. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, so there's one thing. They're figuring out why the HMI is not working. In the worst case, you're going to use my laptop.
Okay.
And you have like a Google something.
I can make that happen if I can connect to you.
So,
Yeah, the internet works fine.
Okay, cool.
or in the worst case, you can see the airdrop.
Oh shit.
I just realized my phone was streaming over.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was live streaming.
Sorry, by the way, lights on.
Very smart move.
Oh yeah, the same for the.
Yeah, exactly. So we have the blinds on the door blinds. So recent.
Yeah, we're going to choose my.
Okay, cool. Shall I just airdrop it?
Do you have like a link or it's
Is it keynote?
let me first connect to the same.
I'm not actually connected yet. I didn't. Do you know the password on top of your head?
What I'm gonna.
There we go.
This one. Yeah.
Show password.
Oh, come on. I have a sticker on my laptop. I still have the Zeit paper sticker. 2 years old. That's the first time I've had a stack. So,
Do you have keynote or do I need to like make it into a PDF?
that's the first thing I remember. This is like the first thing that you get the codes out. Because I saw the playground in the video. That's where but what I really liked, and I think what everybody liked at Campus Loop was that it had this pyramid of, like, I want to start coding this, like, round up, like, you want to make a pyramid like this. That, like, I still beautiful things. Super fun. Do you live here too? A few weeks. Where do you work? Oh, you get all the people. Yeah. So you have
That's probably it ends with EH.
Yeah, that should be it.
Yep.
And if not, somebody else has a nice keynote.
Is it working yet? We're going to choose my laptop. So, the HMI is not working because of the controllers. Okay. So we have two options, or use my laptop or use my laptop. Okay. So I would say use my laptop. I'm not sure how I'm going to use the laptop. You have this keynote.
Yeah, I'm just airdropping my notes
Okay.
as we speak.
I'll see if I can find
Elixir!
That's that flag. The one that's on your laptop. No, this is
this.
Yeah, that one. That's the one I didn't have on top of my head.
Get the fluid.
share.
Oh, okay.
You have your own, so it's not based on like some research. Like you guys did your own experiment.
I haven't done one.
Oh, nice. Clicker would be really helpful.
Yeah, I had to use D, so I have this like monster, and then it has this thing.
Yes. I use CO2W90
Yeah, that
ends
one.
with TH. Yes, that's one. Okay, yeah, things are good. Things are good. I'm just gonna stop playing.
Done.
Yeah, so it might be that then fonts to be on voice. Yes. Oh, I'm also sending you some stuff.
It's not the end of the world if mine has just like Helvetica or whatever fallback fonts. So,
If you guys have any custom fonts, I have some custom fonts from Google Fonts.
yeah, no, just say the whole thing. It's easier.
Yeah, DH.
Best kind of polyglot.
I'm so excited. I know. Sorry, I'm gonna probably spoil expectations of setting this up. I will find the other speakers. So we have Eves and QueerJS stuff. Oh, HJ, of course. Oh, shoot, it's going to be a little bit.
So you want to learn and your role is like design systems at what's that?
Oh, the photographer from I was just going through all the photos and I haven't edited anything yet, but I saw this and I think you'd like it. I kept trying to make me a picture without me noticing, and I looked up.
Oh, got a pretty good one after. Okay, this can stay here.
I was recently started cleaning out my service program, so like maybe 100.
Technology, guys. This is one of the most
Yeah, so the early on is running.
You did not learn your lesson when that happened, but you learned it was.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. There's nothing logging in my Chrome. Or if I'm opening a project window as well. The thing is that HMI cables for some reason are not working. So one of the things you can do is maybe dealing with the IP address carrier to be. Yeah. Okay. Sure. It's AirMedia, right? To install. What is it called? I'm sorry. What is it called that you could install if you want to do remote? AirMedia. Just go to the IP and we'll confirm with the installer. If you want to use my laptop, it's also fine. Just send me these lines or that's why it's very useful.
I agree, man. I agree. Your mindfulness is not the same.
Oh, he's still there. He's been here for the last 1 minute.
That's a different strategy.
Oh, come on. Yves! Can you come here?
Yeah, it's like
or you can share your knowledge. Very sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's shouldn't be too hard.
Now you can just go to the IP address and then we'll give you
Oh, yeah, it's there. No, it's not.
I'm so happy we got to meet.
It changes every week.
Not here, you like a murder.
Oh, shit, I did that too. Oh, yeah. Oh, can I tell you the order?
Order people?
Oh, no, there's no Google slides.
IP address is gone now. The address? Sorry, my bad. So yes, it's software on it. Why?
So I've been asking him things like,
Ik was ook begin het jaar bij een andere kant, hier in Nederland, bij een ander contract. En daar snappen ze het echt, hè. En ze kenden mij goed. Dus wat ze deden was, gewoon aan het begin, even aan het zadel van, er is een tolk in de zaal. Want vorig jaar plakte iemand, oh wat ik dacht voor leuk. Toen wezen erop, er is een tolk in de zaal. Dus nu lachen.
Even vastzit, dan mis je al woorden. Dat is verschrikkelijk.
Maar ik weet ook van gewoon wordende mensen, dat zij ook soms moeite hebben van een Engels praten. En je hebt mensen die niet weten wat ze doen. En Engels met een moeilijk. En dan is het accent ook moeilijk soms geworden. Dus ja, woorden of doof blijft eigenlijk.
Want ik werk voor een man ook bij een internationale organisatie. Dan ben ik vaak mensen in, maar ook mensen uit India. Nou, nu begin ik het een beetje, het onderwerp raakt er een beetje vertrouwd mee, maar ik heb het echt niet, hij snapte het niet. Je hoort het gewoon spreken als je Engels. Het accent is zo, ik moet even nadenken, oh ja, dat is het. Dan ben je steeds maar te laat. En maar dat ja, dat hebben horen, ik zit dat hebben horen die mensen. Want die vroegen mensen ook aan de telefoon, als ik het goed begrepen heb, zei je dat, bla bla bla. Dus dan moet je gaan kijken, veel horende mensen verstaan het ook niet. Dus dat, ja, voor de tolk is makkelijk om die schuld te geven.
Nee, zulke dingen blijven wel moeilijk.
Hello,
Maar als mensen gewoon heel snel praten, dan houdt het.
Alex. Can you hear me?
Ik weet van twee sprekers, ik heel snel zijn.
Alex.
Ik weet niet als ze praten morgen. Maar als ik dus met mijn eigen taal ben en
Can you hear me? Yes, it's working.
maar probeer niet eens, want ze gaan zo snel. Niet.
Maar weet je, dat is ook voor een
Nice.
Je hebt geen moment om even...
Okay, I'm gonna put on my leggings, baby. I'll be back.
Het probleem nu met deze contract.
I can't hear you back because this is a live stream and not an actual thing.
En praat op 5. Dus elke dag is 45 minuten lang. Als dat ben je horen en mensen praten veel van de data.
Dat ben je al kwijt.
Juist.
En als iemand dan nog normaal praat, op de
Yes,
even
that's
tijd
fine.
en vandaag
I had a
als iemand echt zo raadt, dan mis ik ook wel.
En ik heb al weinig energie. Hè. Daarom wil ik niet geen weer ben blij met dit vertel. Maar zeg iemand die helemaal gezond is en goed hoort, is dat je zo leuk.
Wat is de reden dat...
En wat ik nu doe, en ik moet het programma werken, ik echt wil zien. En zijn mensen hier, ik ken ze wel van gezegd. En overal de wereld met die dingen. Dan zijn ze vandaag in Nederland, een beetje in het land verdwenen. En dan zijn ze volgende week in Duitsland. Dat is echt voor hun echt, ja. Ik zal niet. Ik voel me echt wel best. Met iemand van uit. Daarna de
Maar ik vind meestal Aziaten het moeilijk zo wedden in wat iemand krijgt. Ik heb een keer iemand conferentie naar Canada. Toen moesten we 3 volgen, door tijdverschil, de workshops volgen. Maar hij had alleen maar Japanse en Chinese mensen. Nou, alle 3. En op een gegeven moment toonde hij de presentatie. Die las iemand voor. En ik las nog niet wat ik hoorde. Het is zo onbegrijpelijk. Dus dat hij zei, volgende keer zal ik wel Europese of Zuid-Amerikaanse
ook een congres één dag lang in het AI-museum bij Amsterdam. En dat organiseert een groot bedrijf. En promoot zich als een basis voor het bankelijk. En dan gaan ze en iemand zegde mij, en ik weet niet of je Marie en Dries kent, maar zeg basis voor het bankelijk. Zij zitten in hetzelfde veld. En ze dachten aan ons beiden als moeders. En ik zei ja, prima, die was ook een en dus van ja, niet, maar ik kan niet laten. Ik had jou al gevraagd. En het is dezelfde periode, dat is echt veel. Maar het is heel vast.
eind oktober, welke datum?
Ik weet niet meer, maar ik kan niet. Wat is gebeurd? En ik bepaalde. En toen zag ik om je uitnodigen. En die vragen dus met degene die dat organiseert. Maar jullie zijn allemaal over toegankelijkheid. Hebben jullie chat? Nee, niet. En dat is echt, en toen de 12 tijd geleden, dat is als zij reageren.
Hoe zo'n transcribe operatie werkt?
Wil je stoel omdraaien?
Oh, wacht, dit zijn niet soort van, het is echt precies dat. En het is sneller dan... Het is veel sneller.
Laat ik geen minuut, ik ben niet op.
Ja, dus hij heeft het eigenlijk van de woorden van de woorden. Ja, het is zoals steen, het is precies zoals steen. Behalve dat je niet meer alle letters hoeft te typen. Maar er is een talk, die is gegeven, dat is een lightning talk bij Eurocom in 2019. Van een van die mensen die dit doet live. Ze legt het helemaal uit, zeg maar. Ze zegt gewoon, als ik dit woord wil tikken, dan tik ik dit en dit is wat er verschijnt. Ja, zij van ze zijn ook ze hebben niet hebben dus
yeah, as well.
We're being asked to not record her talk.
What? Sorry?
She asked me not to record her talk, Jane.
Okay, problem. We'll stop before we talk. Yeah. We'll stop the things before we talk.
But then you know that if it's not there, then you know why.
Yeah. 18:29. Wait, the time is
Oh, ik ben te laat. Ja, is dit hacken? Ik volg de instructies op het scherm.
Als het zo makkelijk zou werken, dan
Ja, toch?
anders zouden iedereen onze eigen vakken kunnen.
Complexe procedure.
So when do you think you could get a job?
Mag als je wil.
Ja, ik weet niet waarom we laten doen. Want het maakt niet uit waar het is.
Yeah.
There's a typo.
Where in
Daarvan say it.
Amsterdam. Oh mijn god. Ik ben heel erg fan van ik vind Furbies wel, zijn toch een paar dingen die echt goed voor me zijn. De irrationele angst in mijn ogen of Furbies
I'm just not done for him. Okay, it was done 2 minutes ago. Okay, I accept.
Yeah, I mean, she is probably.
Yeah,
I was just in the list, so you
Still love it? No, I did not turn it off.
At least that. Like, I'm not saying that. Let's drop a line thing in
What time is it?
It's time to start.
Okay, we're 7 minutes late already. Wait, let me finish this tiny pizza. Okay, thank you. It was really good. Okay, everyone, welcome to QueerJS Amsterdam. I apologize for my mistake. That was not done 10 minutes ago, obviously. So, there is a live stream. That's why that phone is there, plugged in like a coma patient. It's like, don't die on me. So to anyone watching the live stream, if this is terrible quality, it's because it's from a phone. There's nothing I can do. Shout out to OnePlus. Cool, so first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for helping organize. I've been talking to him like he's the AV person and he's not. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm just gonna get out of this sticker. Welcome. I did not make this, Kate made this for London and gave it to me. So we do have a code of conduct, which basically states, be nice to each other, just be nice, okay? Just treat people with respect and you'll be okay. If there's any problems, you can call me, which does not have a Netherlands number, so I don't know why I put my number. But, so that's the code for Portugal. Also, my number's on the internet now. I mean, I haven't changed my number since I was like 12. It's bound to happen, I guess. So that's my phone number. If there's any problems, just either find the person with these leggings or call that number. Oh yeah, don't call that number. It's doing live stream. Don't call that number. Just please find me or Paul, and we'll take care of the situation. I'm weirdly strong, I found out a couple of weeks ago, so we're gonna be fine. I know, it's really weird. I beat a Spanish person in like arm wrestling, and that's all Portuguese people want to do, is just beat Spanish people. Not like in real. Okay, so housekeeping. We're on the 5th floor, so if you want to go for a cigarette or you just need some air, you have to go down. You have to wait for someone to bring you up again. And there are gendered bathrooms there and gender-neutral bathrooms there. And that's about it. Thank you for coming, and I don't know what Kate said in this one, but the future is bright for all of us.
She was talking about the other meetings.
It gets better.
Stockholm next week.
So next week we have Stockholm, which is in Sweden. No, I'm kidding. I know this. I'll be there. It's in Sweden, right? Copenhagen is in Denmark. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the 8th of October, we have one in Sweden. We're also gonna have one in Canada, which is new. Bless Canada. Toronto. Bless Toronto. There's the part that speaks English. Shut up. And so we're gonna have that, and there's also 2 in the US, which are on the same date, which is pretty exciting. There's one in New York and one in San Francisco, which are both in the 2nd of November, which is pretty cool. They're gonna have like interconnected live streams. I know, pretty fancy shit. So the running order of this is that the first person is Paul, then we have Sanne, then we have a, 15-minute break so that everyone can go to the bathroom, basically. Please choose different bathrooms, because there's only 2 bathrooms. So then we have Yves and Ash, and then AJ, Chen, we got Chen, sorry. I get very nervous and I don't really know how to handle it, as you may have noticed. So yeah, so we have a full night. I hope everyone has fun. There is food out there, and there are also gender things that you can put on your body. That's on work. And that is the last slide. So please, well, I didn't make the slides. So please welcome Paul. Woo! Welcome.
Thank you. I don't think I'm gonna use this. I'm just gonna yell into the
Yeah,
void
I
a
don't
little
think
bit.
you need it.
No,
No.
it's fine. I tested it, so yeah. I
No.
cannot hold 3 things at the same time. I tried to do that at JSConf Budapest, but
I'm just gonna say it.
things are.
No one tested anything.
So I wrote down a story, a very personal story, and I wrote it down, and I'm just gonna read it to you because I have a bad memory. So I'm gonna do it like this. So this is me, like there, the boy in the striped shirt with his stinky like that because my teacher made me smile, and I was like smiling. So I grew up as, white boy. I had family and I had friends. I went to school and had hobbies, but I never really felt myself connecting to anyone. My friends make jokes that were hard for me to see the humor in. They had interests that I didn't feel any relation to. And because as a boy I was expected to like action figures, I was expected to like toy cars, sports. And the things I did like, I felt ashamed of telling people. Because when there was someone that didn't like the things that normal people liked, they were cast out. People made fun of them. And I've been so afraid to be different that there are a lot of things that I liked that I never told people. And I thought that everyone was just faking it. Faking to be how everyone expects them to be. And because I didn't want to do that, I thought that I was the problem. Growing up in a culture dominated by straight, cis, white men makes it hard to not look and act like one. At least that was how it was for me. And I learned that these kind of people are normal people. They are like the baseline, and everything else is just different. And being accepted meant acting like one of them. This feeling of being the problem, if I didn't conform what people expected of me, carried through me for a very long time, in everything. And I could be very quiet, I could be very distant, not voicing my own opinions, because I was afraid of what people would think of me. I didn't really care about my looks, I didn't really care about my health, because I didn't see any reason to. Because I couldn't be who I really wanted to be. And I took it with me into my job, where I tried to ignore all the sexist jokes that were made. Where I worked with people that were belittling each other, because that was just their way of communication. And where I saw people getting shut down because they weren't straight white men. And because I wasn't like them, and I couldn't join in, I was not taken seriously. And I was afraid to voice my own opinions. But I always thought that I was the problem. But something changed in my life. I met Leah, who is now my wife.
And she was the very first person who truly believed in me. She was interested in what I had to say and didn't laugh at me when I had a controversial opinion. She challenged my way of thinking, but still it took a while before I really was able to voice my thoughts. Then in 2009 was the next turning point of my life. I had a new colleague, very briefly because he left for reasons. But he told me about a conference about Frontiers, which is going to happen tomorrow and the day after. I was a .NET developer in those days, but he thought that I would fit in with the front-end community, and he was right. Frontiers was the first conference where I met people who were a little bit similar than me, who had the passion for their jobs instead of just seeing it as a job. They were excited about being a part of the web, about what's going to come. Remember, 2009 was when HTML5 was just coming out. It was when CSS3 was getting big. And I know that I wanted to be part of that community, so I did. And then I told my boss, I want to be a front-end developer. And he's like, that's what interns do.
What?
I was gutted because of that. But Leah, she pushed me into doing what I wanted. She didn't tell me to quit my job. But I did quit my job. And when I did, I got a new job as a senior front-end developer. And I quit my job. I told my boss what I'm going to be, and he said, are you really going to be able to handle that? So it was like, front-end for interns, I'm not able to handle that. And that confused me a little bit, because I know that Leah believed in me. I finally started to believe a little bit in myself, but this man, he didn't believe in me at all. I've been working there for 5 years, and he didn't believe in me. And that was kind of what lit a sort of a light in me. I finally realized that maybe I'm not the problem. Maybe it was him, it was they were. So after this, a lot of stuff happened in a couple of years. I worked at different companies, places that believed in me a little bit more, which made me believe in myself more as well. I started giving talks at conferences, I helped out with events, I joined new initiatives like webplatform.org and Open Device Labs. And we moved towards Amsterdam, and Leah and I started organizing our own events, NL HTML5. And I really felt like I was starting to help the community, but that the group itself was also helping me, because standing on stage every month talking about myself and about my ideas and giving people a platform to talk about their ideas really felt empowering. With going to conferences and organizing events, I met a lot of different people, and I noticed that a vocal minority was trying to change the tech scene. It also made me see the place I worked at wasn't really that perfect as I thought. It was still a boys' club where everything was about drinking and about playing foosball. And I realized that was not going to change there, not fast at least. And I noticed more and more how unbalanced the tech scene was, how straight, cis, white men were dominating, and I didn't care for it. But except for trying to help and get people into tech and giving them a platform, I didn't really know what to change, how to change everything. So, in 2016, I was speaking at the first edition of QueerJS, which is also happening very soon. And this conference changed a lot for me. And now I'm going to mention a few people that I met there and met a little bit later. Maybe you don't know them, maybe you do, but they meant a lot to me. Starting out with Madeleine. She's the organizer of QueerJS. So the way that she put the conference together, for me, was amazing. It was the first time that I went to a conference that cared so much about inclusivity and about community. And the way that she handled everything with such a power and determination was just inspiring. It made me rethink everything about conferences. I also met other people there, like Flaki, I met him there, but he's always somewhere. But I especially want to talk about Ola Kasidlo. She taught me about how to be a better ally, but also about how to be a strong individual. She doesn't do what other people want her to do. Every time I've talked to her, she helped me understand the tech scene more from other perspectives, but also understand my own place in it. And I think that she's one of the strongest people that I have met in my life. And after QueerJS, I met Marcus Bush, who's also everywhere. And he showed me that you don't have to fit in anyone's view, even if you are straight, even if you're white, even if you're a man. I can be myself without compromise. I'm not making a fool of myself, I'm just being me. But what all these people have in common is that they accepted me for who I am. A year later, I joined yet another company, and that's where I met Stephanie. Stephanie she challenged me to really think about the world and myself. I asked her not to hold back about giving feedback towards me, and she didn't. She shared everything with me about what I was doing, but also about how she saw everyone, about everything that frustrated her. But best of all, she was the second person to support me in everything. And she is someone that I can share everything with. We quit our first job together because our boss broke the code of conduct at QueerJS in 2017. Different story. And that's where I learned that it's not normal for a white man to quit their jobs because of something like that. But the company still made me feel like me and Stephanie were the problem. That we were overly emotional or something like that. And over the past 2 or 3 years, like this is really recent, queer pop culture started to get into my life. Queer Eye, Drag Race, Paris is Burning, Pose. They all showed me a world that I didn't know as well. And it made me question myself, but in a good way this time. So one of RuPaul's most memorable things to me, he said, what other people think of me is none of my goddamn business. So I don't agree with a lot of things that RuPaul says, because he also says things like trans people shouldn't be in Drag Race. At least he said that before. But when I heard this really struck a chord with me. He really lives like that. And the people that I surrounded myself with, Leah, Ola, Stephanie, Martin, all seem to live like that as well. And in Paris is Burning and in Pose, they showed a group of people that live in poverty and that live in an extremely dangerous world for them. And one of the reasons why they do that is they want to be themselves. They want to be able to walk around and be themselves without compromising what society expects them to be. So I took a look at myself. Like, is the way that I am living the way I want to be living, or is it just something that society was expecting of me? Now, I love fashion. I admire people that are able to walk around in amazing outfits and not because how they want other people to see them, but how they want to see themselves. And fashion was my first way, like sort of my drug into expressing myself in a way that I couldn't do in words yet. I got feedback from everyone in the tech community when I went on stage in a pink and black checkered pants, and all the feedback was positive. But that still didn't really feel like enough. So at one point I started to question gender. I started to suspect that I might be a transgender woman. I had many sleepless nights and I didn't really feel good. I thought I couldn't share this with anyone. I felt like I was trying to get into something that I saw on TV. I felt like I was lying to myself. I felt like I was going to be one of the problems in tech, a white man trying to get attention. But I was truly questioning my gender at that point, and I didn't share this with anyone. If you don't share it with anyone, is that a cry for attention? So I decided to share it with one of the people that I could share anything with, Leah, my wife. And now I'm lost my nose. And of course, Leah, she wasn't surprised. It's been going on for a while. She knew. Yeah. And transgender woman, that was not really something that fitted with me. So at one point, it's a long story, we decided that gender fluid is what I was, what I am. And you can talk to me after that later if you want to get in depth to that. So drag queens such as Fleur paraphrase Gandhi by saying, be the strange you wish to see in the world. And I agree. I want to show who I am just because I want to see more types of people. So last week I was on stage in a skirt, in high heels, just like I am now, for the very first time. And I've never had so many positive emotional responses from people. It got me extremely emotional and barely held it together. And it was a beautiful moment for me. I felt like I wasn't the problem. And that's where we are now. Being myself led me to meet fantastic people. I joined an amazing company because of it, and made me realize that I'm not the problem. And I know that this is a perspective of someone who was raised as a cisgender, white, straight man, one with a lot of privileges. I know that. And I don't want to say that you should quit your jobs, because not everyone can. And I don't want to say that you should express yourself as openly as I am doing, because it could be quite dangerous for some people. I just want to say that you are not the problem. Find people that believe in you and will help you believe in yourself. And what other people think of you is none of your goddamn business. Being yourself will inspire people. I was in my 30s before I truly got exposure to queer culture, and I don't know how my life would be different if I didn't live such a sheltered life. But as Jonathan Van Ness once said, it's when people say you can't teach an old dogs new tricks, it's not true. Because you can reinvent yourself and learn new things whenever you want. So reinvent yourself constantly, learn about people other than you, learn about life, and be empathetic. And remember, you don't have to be queer to be empathetic. When you are in a meeting and someone makes a sexist joke and people are laughing except for you, you are not the problem. When life brings you down and you just want to run to the bathroom and cry, but you are afraid of the reaction when someone might find out, then you are not the problem. You are just not the problem. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm not crying. You're crying. I may be crying. Okay, so that was a good start. Where's Anna? She's next.
Right here, yeah.
Are you excited?
Well, the bad news is I can't follow this up with an equally cool, personal story. On the bright side, unless you care very deeply about garbage collection, I will probably not make you cry.
That's good. I can use a break. That'll be great.
You win some, you lose some. So, how many of you actually deal with like memory management and stuff in your day-to-day work? Alright, that's 2 people. No, that's good, because me neither. Which is why I'm talking about this. Because, yeah, like JavaScript developers, or like honestly most developers, because what language do you work in? Like, why do you deal with
Also JavaScript, but also Ruby, but we deal with a lot of requests, so we have to go outside of the garbage collection.
Yeah. And you?
I'm officially a designer, but yeah, mostly in JavaScript stuff.
Oh, so just like very high volume things.
Yeah.
Well, but even if like we don't really need it, I don't like not understanding how something works. So I don't like it when things are like magic to me. Like if you work in Ruby, like I work quite a bit in Rails, and it really bothers me how much stuff just like happens magically. Why does that do anything? Oh, I don't know, Rails magic. So, but really, it is more complicated in real life. But the basic principles, I hope I can bring across. So think of it as when you first start your program, it's like when you move into a new house. You know, it's all nice and clean and empty. You have your nice new couch, your nice bookshelf perfectly arranged with like some decorative vases. But if you never tidy up, if you never purge your stuff, before you know it, it'll look more like this, with the shelves piling over. It is not actual footage of my house, but my bookshelf is similar. You know, no surface to put things on, etc. And it's kind of similar with a computer program, right? When you start, you just have the essential stuff that you created, but as you go, you create more and more things, you fill up more and more memory, and you somehow have to tidy that up. To do that, the garbage collector takes care of all that. To do that, it needs to do 3 things. The garbage collector doesn't only do the cleanup. It also tells you where you can put things, it allocates memory. It figures out, it's like in Marie Kondo's your program, it figures out what is and isn't garbage, and then it actually does collect the garbage. As you can probably imagine, the middle one is the hardest. The hardest thing is to figure out what is and isn't useful. I mean, I'm definitely not the only person who's thrown out something only to a week later go, where's that thing? I really need that thing. Or to keep things just in case I might need them and then never do. So we're going to talk about a few different strategies, algorithms that you can do this. But first of all, it's very hard if I don't have my next slide. So sorry if I skip ahead or have to go back. The hard part about figuring out what is and isn't garbage is that you have two options if you do it wrong. Either you don't clean up well enough and you run out of memory, you run out of space, or you clean up a little bit too much. You know, you're a little bit overzealous, and then you can end up breaking things because if you clean up something you need, you have a problem. One of the things that can cause is something called dangling pointers. I see you nodding like, yeah, been there, but have encountered those. It's basically, so you'll see a lot of boxes on my slides throughout. These just represent a thing, an object, a thing. In this case, there's 3 objects, and the arrows are like references from one to the other. But what happens if somehow I decide that this middle one is garbage, and I get rid of it? Now, I have a problem because I can now never get to that last one anymore. And that is one of the things that can cause a memory leak, because now if I can't get to it, I can't use it, but I also can't clean it up. So this is one of the most important things that we're trying to avoid. Also, is there somebody who can give me like a 10-minute sign, because usually I have a timer?
I don't know how long you're supposed to take.
20-ish minutes.
Interesting.
It'll be fine.
Honestly, you'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Just do
If you
it.
guys get impatient, just I don't know.
If someone gets bored, just ping me.
Yeah, or just yawn or something. Anyway, sorry. So we're gonna start with the easiest way to keep track of what is garbage. It's called reference counting. One of the languages that uses this, or at least part of it, is Python. And the basic idea is if nothing points to it, you're not using it. So think of it like this. I just changed this from Ruby syntax to JavaScript like this today. So if there's any syntax errors, don't tell me. Alright, so let's say I create a variable and I give it the value, the string QueerJS. So very simple. I put it in memory, and one thing, the variable name, now points to this thing. So it has one reference. I create another one, creatively named other name, and set it equal to name. Now there's 2 references, there's 2 variables pointing to that box in memory that holds QueerJS. So far so good. Two pointers, we're clearly using it because 2 things point to it. Now if I clear those, we drop the counter. So somewhere in the memory where we keep this object, we just we just keep a counter. We just do +1, -1 as references get created or destroyed. And when it hits 0, we declare it garbage. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Unfortunately, there are some problems with that. If things point to themselves, you can lose track of them. So for simple cases like this, that worked perfectly. But now what if we have this? We have an object here. It's just it has a key other, doesn't have a value right now. So this object as a whole has 1 reference. Now we have the other one, and we point it back to A. That one also has 1. Cool, so far so good, no problem. Now, because we set, I really have not named this other because it's very confusing. Given this help 5 times, every time I think I need to change it, and then I don't until
Do it now.
right now. No, we're not doing that. Anyway, so object B points back to object A. So now 2 things are pointing to object A. Again, still so far so good. But what happens if we point A back to B? There we go. Now each have 2 pointers, and you might be able to see where this is going. If I now clear A and B, and they point to nothing, those 2 objects, each, their reference goes down by 1. But unfortunately, they still have 1, so we don't know that this is garbage. But it's just just a little circle of objects floating by itself that we can't get to. So unless we come up with a different way of figuring out if it's garbage, this will just float there forever, taking up memory.
One of the ways you can fix that is by using a different algorithm called mark and sweep. This one and variations on it are probably the most common, especially the marking part of it, probably the most common garbage collection algorithms. Ruby uses mark and sweep with, again, some fancier aspects to it. And here the basic idea is, if you can't get to it, you're not using it. So think of it as like, the thing, if it's that far back in the drawer, it's like if it's at the bottom of your shelf, you're probably not going to wear it. If it's like the bottom of your wardrobe and you really can't get to it, you're probably not going to wear it. But if you absolutely physically cannot get to the thing, you cannot use it. So to do this, well, the algorithm consists of two things, marking and sweeping. Very computer scientists are very creative when it comes to naming things. So what you're looking at here is, so what you do, you start at the root of your program, which is certain let's start with global variables, because you can always get to those. Every language, every program has a certain set of root objects that you can always get to. We're going to consider that like the root of the tree, like this one, the first one, the top of the tree. I don't know where my pointer, oh, it is working. Anyway. What you do is you start there and you follow all the references outwards, marking them as you go. So you start with the very first one. Oh, this is my helpful schema. So this is the very first one. You mark it as alive, or still in use. Then you follow all the references from out there, and you mark those. Like, okay, cool, I can get to this, it needs to stay. And you do this with a stack usually. So you go to that one, you follow those references, you put those on top of the stack, you go, okay, cool, I'm using this one. And then you go back until you've marked everything and your stack is empty. Then you've been, like in real life this would be like way, way, way more, of course. You follow all the references to all the things and mark them as in use when you get to them. And then what you're left with is garbage and can be cleared up. And this is pretty solid. The only downside, the main downside of this is you want to stop. You want to stop the world exactly while you do this. Because if if I'm like halfway down the tree and something new gets created somewhere where I haven't been yet, or where I have already been, you might think it's garbage when really it's just like freshly created and still in use. So I think by now there are like fancy ways around that, but in principle you want to like stop execution of your program while you do this so you don't run into trouble. And the other problem is if you just sweep, you just go through the memory, you go like, okay, you're empty, you're empty, you're empty. You end up like at the bottom there with like, gaps, little chunks of memory that are like separate instead of one big chunk that you can use. That actually was the next slide, that's great. You can solve that. You can solve that with a copying collection, which helps you kind of like think of it like as your bookshelf. You take out little books that you don't want, and then you just kind of like push the whole shelf back together instead of just leaving random gaps. So to do this, you split the memory that you use into two. So you only really use half of the memory that you have available at one time. Initially, you usually mark just the same way as you would mark with the mark and sweep. But then, instead of like marking it, you copy it over to the other half of your memory. But then, you put it nicely, you shove it nicely together as you go. So instead, think of the tree from the last slide. When you mark it as active, instead of just marking it and coming back to it, you copy it over to the other half. The benefit of this, as you can see, is that everything gets shoved together. So instead of 3 little memory gaps, you have like one big chunk available. The downside is, because you have to split your memory in half, you have to run your garbage collection about twice as often. You win some, you lose some. Oh yeah, those were garbage. And now it's empty. I had so many animations there. Alright, cool. So this is nice, but you don't want to do garbage collection very often, because as we've seen so far, you usually have to stop your program. It might take a while, so you don't want to use it. You don't want to garbage collect if it's not necessary, right? But you also don't want to run out of space. So one of the interesting, like, what is it, like, it's not a theory, like a hypothesis, is called the generational, I think it's a hypothesis. But anyway, I think what you can do is generational collection. And that's based on the idea that statistically, objects are likely to become garbage very quickly or stay for a very long time. And so that means that if you know you've been using something for a while, you probably don't need to check it every time. You can think of it, for example, as well, if you make like a web request, I'm going to stick with my Rails example for now, but I'm sure it's similar in other languages and other like frameworks. Let's say if you make a request, there's certain things that are just there, right? That are just running on the server, like your router, the controller, that's just there and you need it. You really don't want to get rid of everything related to that. But everything that you create to just fulfill a single request, you can probably get rid of as soon as that request is finished. And most things will fall into that latter category where you just create them and then pretty quickly you don't need them anymore. So to do this, you once again have 2 or more generations. So in addition to their reference counting, Python also uses generational collection to deal with those cycles, because just reference counting doesn't work, as we've seen. So what you do, you divide your memory once again into 2 or more spaces. Everything that gets created starts in the young generation. When that fills up, you garbage collect it. In whichever way you do garbage collection, you know, maybe you mark and sweep, maybe you copy it to another space again, but you collect it, you free up some space, and fills up again, you collect it again, but if an object has survived a few collections, instead of keeping it in the new generation, you're like, okay, cool, you've survived a few rounds, you're a grown-up object now, you get to go to the old generation, and then the entire new space can be used again. This graph is not entirely accurate because realistically it would be the other way around, like you would have way more new objects than you have old objects. I think it's in my notes, but I can't see those. If I remember correctly, Python has 3 generations, and I think they collect the new generation about every 700 new objects, and the old generations only about every 10. Like, so it's a massive difference. I'll check my notes if anybody wants to know the exact numbers at the end of the talk, but it's a massive difference is the point that I'm trying to make. But then that's convenient because you don't have to check those things again and again and again, because you know that they're probably just in use. You do have one problem. What if, for some reason, something old points to something new? Here you see like the objects. So these are old objects. Well, I don't know what happened there. We're creating some new objects here. All fine, so far so good. Now we have a bit of a problem. Because let's assume that we're doing mark and sweep for our garbage collection, but we're not collecting the old generation. We're not looking at that. It's like grandma's side. We're only looking at the baby side. So if we start at that one all the way to the, left, we started going all the way to the left and we follow all the references, we're not going to get to that mint colored one in the middle. That one that we just created, you know? That's a bit of a problem. So ways around that, this is one thing, for example, that Ruby uses as well. That line that I put in the middle there is called a write barrier. And it's basically, it keeps track on any pointers that get added across generations.
It's about 5 minutes left.
All right, well, I think this is my last slide.
Just letting you know.
Thank you, perfect. That means that I'm nicely on schedule. So what you do to fix that is you keep track, it's called a write barrier. I cannot tell you exactly how a write barrier works, just that it keeps track of those cross-generational pointers. And if it notices that there's a cross-generational pointer from old to new to old is fine, because you're always checking new. Old to new is the problem. As soon as we find that out, we add that old object that has the new pointer, we add it to that root set, we add it to that set of starting points for the mark and sweep. So we know that we will then use that one to check as well. And I believe that was actually it, yeah. Not a very long time, but I hope that at least it's like demystified garbage collection a little bit. Let me know what you think. You can find me later. And if you want to know more about this, I would recommend the top book there, the Garbage Collection Handbook by Jones, Hoskin, and Moss. And if for some reason you're specifically interested in Erlang, I may have given this talk at a Erlang Elixir conference before, that's why it's there. You could look at the Erlang Garbage Collector blog post, which is also very interesting. These are both very, very technical and go into way more depth than I did. But hopefully this is a good starting point. Thank you.
Okay, you can actually go talk now because
You
we're
can fight me
actually
now. We're having
you
a
can
break.
fight me now because we have a break for 10 minutes. I'm trying to see. Okay, so should I say 7:26 or is that stupid?
No, it's fine.
It's fine. Okay, 7:26. Okay, we're doing this now. 6. Okay, up to 7:30 is fine. Max.
Inside.
Thanks for your help.
We talked about I figured once you stand next to it.
That's fair.
It's like more personal than I want to talk about with my parents.
Someone who's interested in great research.
So like, no, this isn't gonna fuck that shit. I'm gonna then I gotta smoke. Yeah.
I'm talking about like money that we don't have to pay back money. Wait, let's check it out.
Yeah.
This. You know what it reminds me of? You know in the Goonies where the group, they're trying to lower the bridge and then that girl has to play the organ? It reminds me of that. This is really cool. So like each one is a key.
I'm gonna grab a drink. I need it.
Now you can just go.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's dope.
Me too.
I find this part scary. I don't want to break anything.
Here we go. Yes. Sign in with Google. One step further.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, we're still. Okay, I will enter my root. What is it share with you? It's a long classroom, sorry.
Then you probably have the two-factor authentication later.
That's good. And I need to level to make sure.
Sorry?
Is it still?
Yes. Oh.
Oh, this is my.
It's very late.
Oh, yeah. Wait, this
Should be fine.
Oh.
Better.
Actually, yeah.
Nice. If they're connecting, try again.
Yeah. Okay, I think the problem is that
Oh, you need to log in through.
it's tied to one account. So your, do you have used Premium? Because maybe you should try it.
I only have Italian and sometimes weird heavyweights. The Italian's also works. Yeah.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very good. I live in Amsterdam.
Yeah, because I was at users.
Ah, nice. Wait, wait.
It's good.
Yep. Sure. You find it too touristy? Oh, it's cool.
Yeah.
Wait.
Try not to
Maybe I
break your
shouldn't say
laptop
it,
just
yeah.
before.
Sarah.
Ow! What?
Small FYI, I just, if it's okay, I asked if I could turn the,
Oh, yeah, it's
the
fine.
cooling down a little
Yeah,
bit.
if he knows how.
Yeah, if he knows how. Exactly.
I'm bringing you a sweatshirt. No, it's fine.
Very like your PowerPoint carry on. No, it was funny. Like, they kind of.
That's literally what it was.
Yeah, but it was like enjoyable funny. Like, nobody was laughing. Like,
Also, that's fine.
it still wasn't the case. Okay, so yeah. We have like the end of the
That was like, honestly,
yeah.
And they'll be best friends.
Yeah, exactly. That's fun. Yes, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, hey. Goddamn structure. That's not a real jacket. Oh my god, did you know? Oh my god, let me tell you something. You can use Whoa. You can use a jacket and a sweatshirt. Okay, put this on and I'm giving you my jacket. Because it fits over the sweatshirt. I'm serious. Don't want to wow.
Cool, this is really nice. Thanks for going out of the way and selling things.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, I'm German. And it's like, it's not a different letter. I actually wish that to get the book card. Yeah, that's what's my
I was almost
You do know that that's still off. Yeah. Well, my phone number to the world.
I'm not in India, that would be good. No, I'm famous. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, my husband looked at me and he was like, oh, you also support me. That was cute. Yeah, but I'm not caused by it. Yeah, I'm famous.
Trying to make you smile.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Fucking tough party.
Yeah, it's actually honestly also like and then that's outside. Yeah, thank you. We're actually gonna like head out because we have like
Isn't it weird? I always feel weird when I know that people are doing the comments and I'm like watching them at home. I would feel like I am like being rude.
I sometimes go to a yeah, that's right.
No. Over there. So that's why you don't want to let me do that. Oh my god. Dude!
Oh, yeah. I need to. I hope they don't watch it.
I am gonna make so fucking strange getting into this stuff. I'm gonna come
I'm gonna keep
so much.
it.
So much to say when it's gonna be fucking gross. It's gonna regret you if I ever do that.
Yeah, I thought like when you told me. Oh, really? Kenya? Not
Yeah.
South Nigeria?
Yeah, well, better.
Better.
So the thing is that it's prison, they usually ship you back to your country. If it's that penalty, they will not ship you back to your country, but you want to die in Nigeria. You do not want to die in
not
Nigeria.
going to and there's also
Oh, that's only the north?
yeah, only the north.
You know what? This part of the country. No.
Yeah, so there are also there's the quite different. It's very different. No one should relatively simple. Oscar and
Can they get me out of this? From Kenya?
We're going to prison to work together.
It's not better. It will separate us, Ibis.
Oh no!
Like when you get only one cat. He has a brother.
You didn't see any rats?
Oh no, I'm
Wow.
so straight. You have no idea. I'm gonna talk about so many things.
How strict?
So many.
Yeah. No.
Wait, what time is it?
30.
Can I sit on one of these?
Yeah.
Sit wherever you want. Oh, there's a typewriter here.
Yes, so it's for Elise. Like there's the transcriber, and she's sitting there with her tablet.
Oh, this is cool.
Yeah. She just brings her own transcriber. It's really good.
This is so old but modern. Oh nee, maar er zijn er maar 2000.
Everyone! I miss Angela. Where's Angela? She left. Very sad.
Ce soir. Thank you. Oh, my phone. My phone is vibrating.
You don't need anyone to go downwards, right? For booking?
Down?
Hey, there's a logo.
You need to go back up again.
Yeah, stop.
Oh, no, you don't need anyone to go down, no.
Just sneak out.
Smooth. Oh, I need to introduce you.
Oh yeah, that's the nailed it. I guess his name. No, his name is Deja, right? Not Deja. I don't know why. My brain thinks it's Spanish. And it's like, yeah. No, it's not. Not everything is Spanish. No? Okay, cool. So we're...
You don't need it.
I know it's on purpose to annoy the fuck out of everyone. Completely would. Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming back. Some people didn't have to catch a plane, I get it. Thank you all for coming back. So next up, we have Ibis. Woo. That one. He's my boss, so please be nice. So, I curse a lot. I can't get. I'm not very job material, so you can't have that. So please welcome Ibis. Be nice.
Hello.
Also you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try my best. Yeah. So like Sarah said, my name is Ibis van Hoorne. This isn't hard name to pronounce. Everywhere. So not only outside of the Netherlands, but also in the Netherlands. So I'm used to Eves, to Ives. My friends have more trouble with my name. They call me Flip. So you can call me Flip as well. That's the easiest way to go. Also easier to remember. So it's pretty funny the start of this because this is my only presentation that I've ever made that's not on the web. And today we had to use someone else's laptop. And the worst thing is this presentation is made in Framer. So we had to first install Framer and then get the files over and then install it. But yeah, other story. So I mostly talk about Code Sandbox, but today I want to talk about something different, something that I find pretty important, and that is design and code, how they interact with each other, what they, what the team of designers and developers, how they communicate. And I especially want to look at the tooling. What can we do to make the handoff between designers and developers, to make the communication better, move some responsibility, and what can we do in the tooling? So, here we go. I asked a question long time ago, 5th of September 2018, how people build pages, how people build different parts of their app. And the general response that I got often was, it depends. That's always the first answer. But then, more specifically, people build it in, they prototype it in a design application, and once they think that it's ready, they move it to code. So there are some. I've noticed that there are some kind of problems with this approach. So the two problems that I've often seen is that design and code are in isolation. So you build a design, then implement it in code, and you don't have any overlap between the two. There's not any common ground. And it's in duplication, which comes down to the same thing, where if you have a design and then implement it in code, every time you need to change the code, then you need to change the design as well. So I'm going to show this with an example. Say I have this beautiful concept. This is a beautiful design. It has everything. It has rounded corners. This button has more rounded corners. It's like this bar button. And the names are very cool and well, good design. Then the implementation, developer implements it, and it's a bit different. For example, these are some very simple examples, but for example, what we've noticed with Code Sandbox is when we designed the profile page for Code Sandbox, we didn't expect that someone would get 1 million views. So at some point it says 1,200K views, which is not something that's really applicable. So you can find it, then the developer implements it, and it looks like this, and that's not good. So they go back to the designer implements some new states of the button, and it goes back and forth until you reach this equilibrium. Oh, I made this beautiful animation, I want to show it. So that's how it goes. Getting them in sync is not at the same time. It's a lot of back and forth communication. So the question is, how can we improve this handoff? But first I want to talk about the past, what's happening right now, and the future, with where we tell Alexa to move the design with design 5 pixels to the right, 5 pixels to the left. That's the future, but we are now in the present, so let's go with the past. So, CSS spec was released in 1996. Exactly 3 days before I released. I thought, wow, CSS is there, it's time for me to be born. Work with this. Only a year later. Don't leave yet. So only a year later, this tool came out. Who knows this tool? Oh wow, yeah.
Come on, where's front page?
And it was so ahead of its time. It had this preview, and you had code, and you could even, when you made changes in the preview, it would also update the code in some cases. So this was the perfect tool to really get into web development and get web development started. I also learned a lot of web development just by dragging stuff in Dreamweaver and seeing the code update, and it was super powerful. And you can see that at the start, lots of people built websites with Dreamweaver. It was a super powerful tool. I think it was the default tool for web developers at the time. So the thing with the Dreamweaver is that it had everything. You built your static website inside Dreamweaver, then upload it to your FTP server with all the generated files by Dreamweaver, and you move from, well, you're done, you did a deploy. And oh boy, everything has become more complicated after that. There was a move of having static pages to having pages populated with data. So tools like Rails came to light, where you actually, for example, if you have a store, then you have the same page, but the data is different between different pages based on the path. And you have cards and stuff. And Dreamweaver was not really the tool that could fit with this. You would just be able to build static pages. So for example, you would be able to build a front page, but as soon as something became more dynamic, you needed an actual server to populate the data, and Dreamweaver became less useful. And more people move to this model with the .com bubble to move stuff to the server generation. And these tools became more popular. So you had the design tool, so example of here is Sketch, and you had the development tool, which is kind of similar to how the flow that we have now, where we build a design first and then implement the design in a development tool, like Coda. I think that's a really nice logo. There's this small drops on the leaf. That's the only thing that I've really experienced of that tool. But it was very popular and very cool. And that's the flow that we're in right now. So you've seen that we've moved from the client to the server, but there's now another sort of movement that's going on. Oh, look at, client, we're now on the client. Oh no, we're going back to the client because we get these tools. The very interesting part is we have Angular, React, Vue. The very interesting part is that they speak a much more similar language to how designers talk, because they talk in components. So you have these different components that you now define instead of pages itself. And you define these components in code, and you can actually reuse them. And this is an interesting opportunity for design tools, because we now again have a common ground to stand on. If you talk about components, then they can be designed in the design tool, and they can also be implemented in code, and you have these overlap. So what I want to show is a tool that I found super interesting, Framer. Framer tries to make this a bit more closer to each other. You have React, which is mostly known in the developer community, and then you have Sketch and Figma in the design community, and now they implement React components in designs. And you can do some really cool stuff, because now you can do interactive things. And the example that the Framer founders give is that lots of animations and interactions are built by developers, while actually designers are very visual minded, and it would be super cool if you can give them the power to create these interactions and animations. So in this presentation is in Framer, so you can actually play with stuff. You can move this. It even has inertia. Look. This button, and this time is also, for example, the current time, which is useful for me because now I know how long I still have. For example, a map. Amsterdam. And you can do some other things. One of the cool examples that I have is we have this animation, and it was built inside Framer, because I already had this component for the glowing cube, and I was able to import that component in the design and just place them right. Wait, I can show this. I will show this now. Framer. Hello. Hidden in the background. It's in the desktop. Bloop. Oh.
I have one.
Oh. Well, I hope I'm not crashing everything. So this is a component I can move around. The bounding box doesn't really. These are just these are 6 diffs, all transformed, and they have an incredible box shadow, which makes it very hard for Safari to render this, but that's how it works. And I can change some properties too. For example, I can make it animate, and I can change the offset, so it does like this. I can change the color to be really any color. And this way I was able to really be creative in how to do, how to make something I wanted to make. Okay, ooh, this is a different keyboard. I went too close. Can I do this again? Oh. So this is the interesting part about blending design and code. So right now, I have given an example of making a design tool interact more with developer tooling, so that you have some aspects of the developer tool inside the design tool. This is very interesting, although my opinion also has shifted a bit, in the sense that I think that we can also make the design tool, the developer tool, a bit more designer friendly. In the end, the goal would be to make designers autonomous in how they can make design changes. The problem is now that designers, they have to go through the developers before they can make a change to the design. This is some overhead, and we need to have a single source of truth for the design system. For example, it would be interesting if you have a developer tool that can change parts of the design system so that designers can, in a simple way, change the design system, for example, and that a diff is generated so that designers become more autonomous, developers become more autonomous. Okay, that's the kind of way out ahead. One of the things that we can do right now is super interesting. We can move the responsibility of layout to the design tool. Like before, this is something that's very visual oriented, but it's funny how developers are doing the layout. Designers make a design for 3 breakpoints, and then they give it to the developer, and they have to do the actual layouting, and then they find a breakpoint where it actually doesn't work. Back to the drawing board, literally. So I made one example of, yeah, it's here. Framer has this concept called stacks. With stacks, you can, it's literally Flexbox, but in a visual way. So I made this design of Code Sandbox, and it's using stacks, and I can do boop. And now content is on the other side. We have the sidebar on the left side. Same for things like icons. Move things around. And the cool thing is, if I would do this, oh, I need to get the outer thing. If I would do this, you can see that the sidebar doesn't change its width, because the sidebar has a fixed width, but the other parts, they change their size, and it's because we kind of define this in Flexbox. This stack says which direction, how to distribute. These are just literally flex properties. And because of this, designers can have the responsibility of the layout, so they can build a design that works on a fluid width. Very interesting. Did it update? No. Ah. Oh well. The second thing that we can already do is put real data in a design tool. Data sources is kind of a way of describing this, data providers, where the designs don't use mock data, but real data. You have a design that can connect to an API and then use that data for the designs. Sounds crazy, I know. For example, this is all generated, this is all random data, because there was this random data provider that gave the data to a grid component, and then this grid component renders a profile component, and that uses the data that's sent. This is pretty interesting, because this way you can actually validate your design across, well, real data of your company, and that way you can actually see how it looks in real life. So these are the interesting things that that we can do, and we are not near the point that we have a single source of truth yet, but I think it's interesting to talk a bit about how we can make the handoff between designers and developers more interesting. Yes?
Have you ever looked at Android WinForm/WPF and Java FX design? Because that seems to be exactly what you're presenting right now.
Yeah, we're going back to the past.
No, it's not the past, it's still pretty much the current, but
yeah,
web is always redeveloping itself.
Yeah, that's true. That's the interesting part. For example, I've learned, my first programming language was Visual Basic. And Visual Basic was literally moving a button into a window, double-clicking the button, and defining its functionality if you press the button. It seems like we're going in this flywheel of doing things all over again, but that's pretty interesting too. This is a bad animation. Conclusion. So my opinion also has shifted a bit, and that's in the sense that I think that developer tools should also be more designer-oriented. Maybe there's a middle tool that serves both designers and developers. But I think that the discussions around this are super interesting, because when you look at when a product or when something is made, then there is a lot of friction between the handoff of designers and developers, and we can do some improvements here. Yeah, so if anyone wants to talk about this after the talks, and that would be nice. Oh yeah, right.
That's good.
Oh, is Sarah here?
No.
Oh, then I'm
Sarah
gonna-
left. Oh.
Rage quit.
Scared her with Flexpa.
Oh, no, pose here.
I'm here. Yeah, perfect.
So you can do the talk show thing.
Talk show. Yeah, so that was awesome. And next up we have Ash. So while we're getting ready, oh, it's all right. Give it up for Ash.
Why is this what?
What?
Did you make your own PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm messed myself up. Let me just go back. You did everything from scratch.
Obviously, it's Windows 95 and React.
When I try like to make a PowerPoint presentation, I need to make like PowerPoint itself.
Maar ik wil het weten, waar je moet voorbereiden. Maar het is gewoon Adrian.
Yeah.
That's duplicate. Yeah. That's the problem.
Here we go.
Why wasn't it Windows 95?
Someone leave?
Well, me too.
Because you can't
Very
leave.
confused.
So you left.
No, I'm dead serious. Like that was still stuck down there. Like you can't leave. This is an actual hazard.
Okay.
Like someone needs to fix this shit.
Well,
So.
are you looking? It's my job to fix things, and so I think that's
Fix things.
just don't go.
Just don't go. Don't set any
You can fix
fires.
that by being very like seductive.
Oh, this is one, right?
We'll break the little gates downstairs if there's fire, don't worry. Exactly.
Cool. Well, while they sort that out, I'll try and run through my talk, I guess. So, hi everyone.
While y'all are screaming.
Yeah. We're good. I'm sure Why did nostalgia sound?
That was like Windows ME. What the hell?
Yeah. Windows 95 actually.
See, told you.
Yeah, there we go. We've got a winner. There's no prize. I'm sorry.
Because I'm old.
Anyway, hi everyone. I'm Ash. I am a cis gay he/him from Brisbane, Australia. I've been here for about a year now. Moved over for a change of pace, and I just had my anniversary in Amsterdam last month, which was Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of QueerJS, I just wanted to say really quickly, Sarah's not here, so she's going to miss this. She can tune back in later, I guess. But when I first saw that this was becoming a thing, I was so excited because since I've been here, I haven't really found my space in the queer community, or like I don't have so many gay friends yet. And yeah, when I heard that QueerJS Berlin was happening, I jumped straight on a train and I was straight out there, and so that was a really beautiful event. Yeah, I'm super happy.
Just too hot.
That's true. It was incredibly hard. So in terms of my talk, I want to make a new website. So a few months back, I was in a position where I was like, you know what, I'm looking for a new job. I want to update my portfolio site, sort of reflect a little bit better what I'm good at, what my capabilities are, and yeah, it got me thinking about when I got started in web development, where I began, and it was in a time that was decidedly more 8-bit than it is now. Yeah. So this was a time of things like dial-up internet, things like the Backstreet Boys, 1996, and websites that looked very much like polls. Beautiful, beautiful websites. And this gave me like a lot of inspiration for
Perfect timing.
Yeah, this gave me a lot of inspiration for what I sort of wanted to get. So yeah, I thought going into this process, it might be fun going and back to the beginning and sort of pirating the software that got me started on my journey originally. Front Page Express. This is an amazing piece of software. It came with Internet Explorer 4 and 5, and it was a WYSIWYG editor that you could create a website. This is me rushing through, and I'm an expert website developer. My favorite feature, you can put a background sound on your web page, so when you visit, you get the so exciting. And this was like how I first got into web development. I'm not even kidding you.
kidding.
Oh. But yeah, it really was a different time.
I feel your pain.
So yeah, so I actually got started making websites before I even had the internet. And what I would do is I would kind of treat websites, making websites a bit like a mixtape. I'd like do up my HTML and put in some images and some stories, pop them on a floppy disk, and then give it to a friend. This is how we got things done in Australia in the 90s.
That's cutting the milk, right?
That's also true. Yeah, and the thing about these is that a floppy disk holds 1.44 megabytes of data, so it's not especially big. So Front Page Express eventually graduated to Front Page, which came with Office, and then it disappeared. It's not a thing anymore. We did have Dreamweaver as well, which was the tool that I first learned CSS with, which was kind of cool. Things like Flash. Flash
Yeah. And ActionScript.
And ActionScript was my first experience of really JavaScript, aside from like on-click stuff. It was, yeah, just amazing time, really different experience. Like some of the best memes of the 90s and early noughties were based on around Flash, and so.
Albino black sheep.
Oh my god. And Newgrounds, everything on Newgrounds.
Everything. It was a beautiful, beautiful time.
Yes, we're old. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. But I guess the thing, it was a time of boundless creativity. People could just go and create things. There was no real shame in it, and it was really accessible to everyone. It was cool. But nowadays things are different. We have the new stack. And the new stack is still things like HTML, JavaScript, CSS. We don't use these things so often anymore. We try not to when we can, just because they're a bit old. These days we have tooling to sort us out. So tooling is based on Node.js, which is an amazing JavaScript engine. You can run things on the server. And thankfully, Node.js also comes with something called npm, which is a package manager, so you can get all this tooling and sort of install it on your computer. One piece of tooling is Yarn, which is exactly the same thing, just slightly different. So once we install both of these, we can install something like React, which is what I'm using at my work at the moment. It's good. I quite like it. It's basically HTML, except it's virtual, right? So that's really good. Once we have React, that's right, you might need to use something like Create React App to get your scaffolding set up. Eventually, you're going to need to learn things like Babel, Webpack, because things are just going to break and you're going to have to know how to fix them. And on top of that, maybe add something like TypeScript, just for type safety, because we all like to be safe. Play it safe. So now we've got our Hello World app set up. We can start looking at things like Service Worker and progressive web apps so that people can install your website onto their phone, which is amazing. Like, no one ever does this, but it's really important. Then you can start looking at things OpenCrowd for social media. That's important. Windows Tiles was something I learned about the other day. It's custom functionality so that people can install your app into their start menu.
Nobody.
And then at that point, we've got this fantastic JavaScript app, but what about SEO? We might need to look into server rendering, isomorphic JavaScript, and improving this for search engines and things like that. And the next thing for me is I just give up. And my theory is like, I'm not having so much fun anymore. There's not so much whimsy. There's like checklists, pages and pages of checklists to get things going. And me personally, like, I'm not convinced that anyone truly knows the full front-end stack anymore. Does it? I mean, I'm not even going to ask. It's fine. We can just assume that that's a true point. So yeah, in terms of that, I think we've kind of had this balkanization of front-end, and so now HTML is for accessibility people, consultants and things like that. CSS is for designers and people making design frameworks. And JavaScript is for developers, or engineers, I don't know what you call it. And yeah, this kind of, I guess, makes a bit of a problem, I suppose, because we end up having people, we're actually training up React people who go into the workforce knowing React, don't really know HTML, CSS, making websites out of divs and styling them with whatever's at hand. And yeah, I think this lends itself to a particular kind of gatekeeping, because these people and not all people, obviously, but there's a certain type of person who looks down on someone who's doing CSS or doing HTML accessibility, all this kind of stuff. And I don't know, it just makes me a little bit nostalgic for a simpler time. Yeah. Who had a GeoCities website? Like, this is most of the room. I am talking to the converter. This is fantastic. So yeah, GeoCities was amazing. Had like 0 barrier to entry. Anyone could make a website, and it was just a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, it died a tragic, tragic death in 2009, which was incidentally the same year that Sony ceased final production of the floppy disk. It is no longer. They are no longer being created. It's, yeah, a sad time. We've left this nostalgia behind us. So, thankfully we've got a few things. That code pen should be a code sandbox, just saying. Oh, that's too far. Yes, this one. NeoCities is great. It's kind of like the spiritual successor to GeoCities. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it, but you can sort of create an account in a little community and make your website, and it can be as corny as anything. I love the code pens, the code sandboxes, the code things as well, because they give you a little place where you can play. Anyone can sort of go in there. You've got your HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You can CodePen in particular is the one that I'm using, just because it's the one I've always used, and it's really great for scaffolding things. But there's a really good design community on there, which is great. Glitch is awesome. You can create Node apps, you can create websites, and it's just like one click, you're there. And all of these things are just really good for learning because they take the mysteries and the DevOps out of development, which is really cool, I think. Yeah, so anyway, back to my website. Having taken all of this into account, I decided not to take any of my advice. Decided to massively over-engineer things. I wanted to learn React, so I was like, yeah, I'm going to make my personal website in React. And basically ended up building almost an entire operating system in React. I'm going to just jump out of my slides and show you. You probably saw a little bit of it before. So yeah, this is my... Did I close it? Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Nice.
Yeah, this is my website. Essentially, it's a big nostalgia trip. Once I got started, I couldn't stop myself. And yeah, built all of these components in Preact, basically to show off essentially. Which was kind of cool.
Where's the trash bin? I'm missing the trash. There's no trash bin.
Ooh, good point.
Immediately pointing at
Alas,
Garbage collector, right?
yeah, basically, I wrote a blog post on essentially this topic. So if you're interested in reading that, you can go back and check out some of the inspiration that I have for this one. I think I'm running out of time a little bit, but the one thing that I really wanted to do was take it back to its roots, like this site. What I really wanted to do was be able to let it fit on that 1.44 megabyte floppy disk, so that I can still hand it out to my friends, even virtually. So what I did, this is my server farm of Raspberry Pis, highly technical. I went scrounging on eBay, found a floppy drive, and a big pack of floppy disks, which these things are expensive these days.
Wow.
And so when this is all plugged in and set up, it's running Nginx, it's very complex. But I have actually been serving this off a floppy drive. So in conclusion, what I really would like to see is more whimsy in the web. So the next time you're doing your personal website, let's just go crazy. Let's not have shame. Let's just do interesting things and yeah, queer up the web.
Woo!
Thank you.
Where is the WebAssembly though?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Alright, I have an actual announcement this time.
Oh, good.
So if you try to leave through that side, you get stuck, and you can't leave.
Can you scroll up a little bit?
No. You can't. You can't do anything. You get stuck.
Or she didn't leave on that door.
What?
Is this an escape room or something? Like, this is a challenge.
You've got 1 hour to figure it out.
Yeah. Cannot read.
Okay, so the good news is, you gotta leave through that door. The bad news is, Tejas didn't leave through that door. So he got stuck.
Oh,
And so did I. And he wasn't right. So I just yelled at the security person. For a long time.
I may have cursed a lot. They may hate me now. We may never come back. What was it? Is it? I feel like it's a valid reason to yell at someone. It's like, I can't fucking leave your building. And I got stuck in like this floor 0 and I didn't have a phone. Okay, so. Exactly. It's not fun, Ash. It wasn't fun. I didn't have fun.
Sarah, I think this is time to remind you that you are not the problem.
I do have anxiety about closed spaces. Mostly when I can't leave the. Okay, the point is. We have one more talk. And to everyone who's watching, thank you so much for watching this on a live stream. I'm going to shut down my phone and you need to go shut down the camera.
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, I'll do it. Oh, you can do it.
Goodbye, Internet. I don't know how to leave this.
Bye.
Bye, Internet. Don't get stuck in the booking office.